Thank you for coming, poetry and movie lovers. You're all here today. Poetry and movie lovers are my favorite people. Um, I also wanted to thank Beyond My, I want to thank Beyond Baroque from my heart. It's a little bit of a cliche to say from my heart, but damn it, it's true. I was just sitting here thinking about how this used to be called, maybe it still is, I don't know, the land of opportunity. And I've been reviewing my life lately and realizing most of my opportunities have come not from Hollywood, but from beyond Baroque. For poets, beyond Baroque is the core of opportunity to express what you want to do, to make your vision manifest. And so, my vision, one of my visions, which beyond Baroque helped me make manifest, is this anthology. And the reason, by the way, I want to make one little sales pitch, and this will be my last and only sales pitch for today. If you buy one of these, you know what you get for free with it? I'm glad you're all sitting down. Okay, you get one of these. Do you have any more of these? You do? Okay, good. You get at least one little Hershey's chocolate. And this is all very relevant to our lives, especially Harrison Hamm's life, because when he was a little boy, he most wanted, his dream job was to be the CEO of Hershey's Chocolate. And here are chocolates. So, coincidence? I don't think so. It's all mysterious.
I wrote it in a journal in the 3rd grade. I saw it recently. It's true. Yeah.
Okay.
I really like chocolate. It was a problem.
Never outgrown my love of candy and chocolate. Chocolate, we can all kiss you instead. So I want to say just a few things. And by the way, I do want to also thank Beyond Baroque's brilliant staff, and the staff that is inspired, is in itself, each one of them, very poetic. So they found their way to the right place. And all of them have a work ethic. So if you need something, trust in the staff of Beyond Baroque. I'm going to talk just a moment or two about this book, what I set out to do with it, and what maybe it achieves. For the longest time, I have been interested in a commonality or a kinship between poetry and the movies, poetry and film. And I believe, and not everybody I notice, I've discovered, shares this belief at all, but I have always held that there is a kinship between the arts, between poetry and dance, between poetry and painting or sculpture, maybe even architecture, film, fortune telling, tarot card reading, everything. Also, labor, also people who work in the custodial business, traffic cops, everything. Poetry is connected to everything, but especially I believe in the brotherhood and sisterhood between poetry and film. And I had never seen an anthology anywhere that quite expressed what I felt from living in the center of the movie industry. And I give a little bit of a rundown in the introduction about the evolution of movies and why they ended up in LA. I will mention that there was another good anthology that came out. We know that it's good because Elena had a poem in it. And it was a Knopf anthology. It still is a Knopf anthology that is called Real Poems. But I have to say, Real Verse. Thank you. That is so right, and I was so wrong. I always admit when I'm wrong. But I have to say this. when I was getting ready to write my introduction, I went and I read the intro to Real Verse. And oh boy, interesting how people see film and Hollywood and Los Angeles and the movies who live outside the region. Because, well, for one, it was a very short, rather, don't tell the guy, the poor guy I said this, but it was rather a short, perfunctory introduction.
We
And
are live on YouTube. But
I hope to hell he's not watching at this moment, because I'm going to have to call him out. There are a couple cliches. There's some cliches in his intro. Please don't ever tell him. I don't need more enemies than I already have.
only secrets tonight.
It's like things like, stuff that you hear, the glamour and the glitz and or the dream machine or something like that. And I was reading this thinking, we don't think of it that way. If you live here, it's not the dream machine. It's not the glamour and the glitz. We have a different relationship with the movies because we're in it. We're in that world, and it crisscrosses through our lives in all kinds of different ways. And almost all of us know somebody who has had a nice plum of a role in a pretty good movie, It's not a faraway thing, and our relationship to film and the industry is more complex and contradictory. And that is what I wanted to capture in this compilation of poems, which more than 50% are poets from this region or the surrounding region. But, and this is also important, it's not provincial. It's not just a bunch of local poets all talking to each other. It also includes spectacular poets from around the country, who must also be part of the conversation. So, all right, everybody, get ready to get these. We might run out of chocolates. I'm going to introduce the poets who are here today. And the object here, the understanding is, we're not going to just say poets have a totally different way of watching movies, perceiving movies, talking about movies. That may or may not be true. There are some fine film critics who have a lot of poetry in them. But what's going to happen here today is you're going to hear poets talking about the movies, what certain movies have meant to them, and you can decide for yourselves if poets have anything interesting to add to the conversation. I don't know myself. We'll see. So I'm just going in boring old alphabetical order, which I do not do in this book. I did, what did Joyce Jenkins say to me, I think, when I told her, you know what, I'm going to put these poems together intuitively, have one follow the other in a way that has meaning, at least to me. I'm going to do it intuitively. And she said, oh, that method is not for the faint of heart. Yeah, and I found out why. Because as I was up night after night tearing my hair out, going, the poem that needs to follow this other poem has not yet been written. All right. Elena Karina Byrne, sitting to my direct left. A woman who never seems to get old, goddammit. And she is a Pushcart Prize recipient, author of 5 poetry collections. She received an MFA in screenwriting. That's her ticket into this this gathering here today from Antioch University, and she did it during COVID. Some people found some creative things to do during that global calamity. And she's published in all kinds of cool things. Poetry magazine, Best American Poetry, the Kenyon Review, the Paris Review, I'm going to stop right there because I'm starting to get jealous. And she has works as a freelance editor, lecturer, screenplay writer, programming consultant, and poetry stage manager for the Los Angeles Times Book Festival, which you're doing, which is coming up soon. And we have a panel next weekend. Don't we have a panel in it? Aren't I?
It's part of the 30th year celebration.
And we have a panel about the history. I think I'm leading that panel too, about the history of Los Angeles poetry and things like that. So this is what some of the things that she will be touching upon. She teaches a class which she divides various cinematic techniques into 5 sections, and these include but are not limited to vantage point perspectives, forms of juxtaposition, a cinematographer's emotional mirroring, and the ability not only to suspend our disbelief, but to suspend time, something that can happen in both poetry and film. So that's Elena. Then going in just regular old alphabetical order, we come to Harrison Hamm, and Harrison Hamm is sitting to my direct right, and he is a film, TV writer, poet, essayist, educator, and entertainment professional. Gee whiz, you must be at least 40 to have done all that, but you look you look remarkably well preserved. He's originally from rural, this I did not notice, from rural Tennessee. I would like to hear about rural Tennessee. Red state. Good Lord. Okay.
I'm
and
glad to be here.
You survived to tell the story. And he is an alum of Loyola Marymount University, studied with Sarah McLay, right? Isn't that how you found your way into poetry? And he has a bachelor's in screenplay writing, women and gender studies, and his screenplays have already won awards and recognition. Oh my God, look at this. Sundance, Diversa, New York Stage and Film, Roadmap Writers, American Film. I feel, what have I been doing all these years? Standing still? All right. And he co-created and co-taught the university's inaugural queer television course. And this fall, he's headed to New York University for a fully funded MFA in creative writing. Okay, yeah. Okay. You love those MFAs in creative writing. And he is a poetry as a Goldwater writing workshop fellow. Oh, also there's this part here I left out. He was mentored by, and this says showrunners and filmmakers behind Desperate Housewives, Hacks, Bridgerton, and Search Party. But you know what's interesting? When I first read this, I was reading quickly. I thought it said, instead of mentored by showrunners, I read it as mentored by shoemakers. And I went, oh, that's so interesting.
I'm interested if anyone's
I
a
was
shoemaker.
really interested in that, mentored by shoemakers. And then I was a little disappointed. It says showrunners. Okay, showrunners. Okay, I get it. All right, and then we come to Elena. Now, who do we know next? Let's come to Beth. Okay, Beth, we have a beautiful bio that has so much cool stuff in it. But I'm also going to have to pare down this bio a little bit and talk faster. I'm going to have to talk faster, or I'm going to use up all our time. I will have used up all of our time introducing everybody, and then we'll just have to leave if I don't talk faster. Okay, and less improvisation going on. Okay, Beth Ruscio, poet, actor, author of Speaking Parts 2020, winner of Brick road poetry like the yellow brick road. Oh, I love the yellow brick road. I love it so much. And her various, and she was finalist over and over again. And then finally she won the big prize. And she, her many finalist honors of this, the Sunken Garden Poetry Prize. Oh, I love that title too. The Sunken Garden Poetry. Okay, I love that. The Tupelo Quarterly Prize, the Wilder Prize, the Two Sylvias Prize. And she is an actress and a on stage, screen, television. She's won the Drama Critics Circle Award, which is very, very big. Everybody, that is like the biggest award that you could get in LA. And 5, count them, 5 Drama Log Awards and some 3 LA Weekly Awards. Good Lord. Okay, I've totally wasted my life. I'm realizing I haven't done anything. Okay, and she's a former facilitator for Beyond Brooks' long-running poetry workshop and a longtime mentor at Otis College. And she is the daughter of actors. She comes from a working class. Are there any shoemakers in it? I mean, I just love this. I'm so stuck
Set
on
me up.
shoemakers right now. A family of designers, editors, teachers, writers, and actors, and she shares her life with Leon Martel and many of Leon Martel. I can't clap because I'm holding the mic, but yay, Leon Martel. Okay, even their dog is talented. The dog's name is Lolita. So she will be coming from the point of view. Did I read the point of view you were coming from?
I'm a
did?
screenwriter.
I did? Okay. I hope I read the point of view you were coming from. And
get there.
but I think I left it out the point of view you were coming from, which actually says he's going to be coming from the point of view of a young early career screenwriter and poet. That's fair. That seems so fitting. And he will note similarities and differences between he's an author in both modes, poetry and screenwriting, and he's going to note similarities and differences in both of them. And Beth is interested in, and this panel is giving her the opportunity to think more deeply about this, the etcher, Escher, the artist who does this, Escher, which rhymes with something, but I can't think of what right now. But it seems like it should rhyme with something. And yeah, you can all picture Escher, right? This one staircase sort of turns into another, and we don't see how. The Escher-like vantage point of film that also relates to poetry, which she is going to talk about. Now, I have a first question for everybody that they've been thinking about. And what is the first movie that you fell in love with, that made you fall in love with movies? And how about, do you want to answer this first, Elena, since your last name begins with B?
Sure. Is it working? I'm going to be brief. I was 10 years old. My brother was 5.5 years older. And so I saw a lot of really inappropriate films. And the first one that really, and I can't say I fell in love with it, but it was the first film that had an enormous effect on me, and that was Easy Rider. And that poem is in the Real Verse anthology. So that just somehow, and I think what she mentioned, time frames, is all. I mean, there's so much to be said about any of these films, but it was the idea that, like memory, like dreams, you could go back and forth between time frames and still have them interconnected and create this really powerful through story that, whether literally or emotionally, brings you to the culmination at the end. So yeah, Easy Rider.
Harrison.
Okay. Suzanne, I grow more fond of you every second we spend together. I think, well, okay, I'll cheat and have 2 answers quickly. First that comes to mind for like a really early film that I fell in love with had to be Pinocchio, because I watched that film over and over and over. I think I just really wanted to be a real boy. Yeah. I still want to be a real boy. And yeah, and there's something still about like an older animated movie that like gets me every time. But then I think the film that made me want to be a writer really when I was young, and this is outing my Gen Z perspective, was Call Me by Your Name. And such a sensual masterpiece. Every single frame in that, I wanted to eat, drink, sip. I don't know. We won't go further into that. Those of you who've seen it remember the peach scene. Um, but I think that Call Me by Your Name was the one that made me like I don't know see what film could do for the first time, really, in the most tactile way. So that's
That final scene where
oh my
Timothy
God.
Chalamet slowly over what seems like 2 minutes or something, it's probably only less than a minute, slowly breaks down and just crumples in front of the camera is a thing of beauty. And that was the first time I'd seen Timothy Chalamet, and
I
I
have
thought, oh
every
my God.
outfit that he wears in that movie. In in 2019, when I studied abroad in Italy, and actually related to film, was at the Bologna Il Cinema Ritrovato Film Festival for the restored film festival, all archival and previously damaged films from throughout history restored. I was like cosplaying as every outfit that Elio has in that movie. So yeah, it lives deep in me.
Yeah. Okay. Beth.
God, I love that you said. I mean, I love all those movies. I come from a family that makes movies. My grandfather, my grandmother, my two parents, my brother, my sister, all of us, in some way or another, have been involved with movies and making movies. Me, and so we talked movies. We quote lines from movies like around the dinner table. So all of those movies and this movie, which I thought I discovered, I also was 10. I must have seen it in Omaha because you lived in a small town in Iowa. And it was Francois Truffaut's first color film of Fahrenheit 451. And the first thing that was really arresting was that there were no credits. Everything was spoken because in the future there would be no words. I lived in a house full of books. My parents, in fact, our favorite thing to do would be to sit around the living room, each of us reading another book, and oh, what funny part did you just read? Things like that. So, and they would tell the story about when they were dating. They'd say, "Okay, honey, should we go out and have a meal, or do you want to go to a bookstore?" And then we always went to a bookstore. So the idea that this movie was about burning books and about going to houses where they had secret libraries, which would be our house. I mean, I just so many great moments, and the one I want to remember is when Oscar Werner, who I had a huge crush on, who is a fireman whose job is to burn, not just to put out fires, but to start fires, swipes a book in a place where they're going to burn them all, and late at night he reads it, and he starts quoting it to this party that his wife is having. It's completely illegal to have a book, and he starts quoting it, and the women listening start crying because it's a poem. It's Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold that he's reading. And they start crying. It's about, the fatalities of the war. And the woman says, I don't remember those feelings. I don't. And tears are starting down her face. No, those things don't happen. They aren't real. And I just remember thinking that was actually the beginning of my real love affair with books. And now I have a house that they could burn down. I mean, we have a house full of books. Anybody that knows that knows that.
Okay. All right. So I'm also going to answer this question. Many of you have such sophisticated movies. I was
Pinocchio?
6. I was 6. I was a very unsophisticated 6-year-old, and but I lived in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and had seen very few movies. I think this was the very first live action movie that I ever saw, and it was Sinbad, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Now, somebody here is going to remember, because I wrote it down for myself, a couple names I was afraid I'd forget, and indeed I'm forgetting them. And I wrote it down on a receipt, a Taco Bell receipt. I left them in my car. It'll be very useful to me. Never at this point. Who here remembers who was the brilliant animator of all those early 1950s movies with the claymation? He made breakthroughs in claymation, so the Cyclops, could kind of go. Yes, Ray Harryhausen. Ray Harryhausen is right. I knew somebody.
You've been kissed.
All right. That's right. And so, and now it would look, of course, very primitive, but it was wondrously strange for a 6-year-old in whatever year. I don't want to tell people, now people will figure out how old I am. Oh, hell. Anyway, too late now. They'll all be able to mathematically work it out. But my misunderstanding at that time was I realized that what I was seeing was not real. And that the skeletons that, Sinbad had to fight off were not real, and the Cyclops was not real. It was all a fantasy. But I did at age 6, seeing this as my first live action movie, believe that when you became an actor, you simply entered into that world. The way the children in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe walk to the end of the wardrobe, and it opens up a portal into this other universe, this fantastical world, and now you are in it. I thought that that's what actors did in movies, that they disappeared into another world until the movie was finished, and then they came back out.
They do.
They sort of do. Psychically, well, like doing a play too, where psychically your whole head is just, and you lose half your friends because they cannot appreciate what you're going through, all the drama with a certain production. Yeah. So on a psychic level, that's sort of true. But I was not able to, I didn't know about actors sitting in their trailers for endless boring hours eating snacks while the lighting people worked out the lighting. So I didn't know about that part. So I fell in love with movies because I saw it as the only way out of this very ordinary world. It seemed ordinary to me at that time, into this realm of fantastical possibilities. When I was just before I turned 9, I wrote my first poem. And somehow those two, poetry being a means to reinterpret the world according to your own understanding, became wrapped up with the movies. That's that question. Now we've got another good question to keep us going for a while. We'll go in the same order that we did before. What I want to know from everybody is the 1 or 2 movies that to you and your perception are some 1 or 2 of the most truly poetic movies that in their own way speak to what poetry is, what poetry does. And then, because the word poetic means different things to different people and means absolutely nothing to a lot of people out there, probably to about 77,302,000 580 people at last count, my personal count. The word poetic means nothing to them. So that's the question. What do you think? What is the most poetic movie, and what do you mean by poetic, Elena?
Well, because I don't think of it quite in that way. I mean, I when you first asked that question, I thought of Michel Gondry's film Blue Indigo, and because of the sort of overlapping between the dream realm, reality, and a kind of surrealistic other layer that's going on all the time. And I think about that in terms of film too, how that, I mean, just like our memories, we might be thinking about one thing, but another thing comes in, and it's that associating and reassociating that is always happening in both poetry and film. It's also the idea of not being on the nose, not being like too much like this equals this, which is something that we hope for because we want to surprise. We're translating the experience, right? And it's a lot like ekphrasis when, if you're looking at a painting, if you're looking at a landscape, if you're thinking about a poem or a film, what you're doing is what we're all doing is we're exercising our preferred forms of perception. And the artist John Baldessari said we all have hierarchies of seeing, which I think is so much a part of this too. It's like taking, how many films about love have we seen? Millions, right? That over the time that filmmaking has occurred, but it's all about the vantage point place in which not just the screenwriter, but the director and the cinematographer decide to approach the subject. And that's what I'm interested in as a poet, is how am I going to approach the subject? Like, when am I going to enter the moment? And so with those films, and like even something a little bit more literal, like Amélie. I don't know if you've seen Amélie, the French film, but I love it. It begins with a narrator who's basically telling you a poem, but describing the scene as it's happening. And then there's moments like in the film where she sees the man that she loves and she turns into a puddle of water. She falls into a puddle like a cartoon. And that's when I used to teach children. I'd say, well, what happens when the guy's angry? And then they'd remember, the steam comes out of his ears. Say, yes, he's as angry as a steam train and he's rolling down the tracks. And then what? And then carrying that on. So it's, you can take facts, you can take fiction, you can take dream realms, and you can turn it into like a film, scene by scene. And sometimes I like to say that our stanzas are like us individual themes, but scene by scene you can unfold a moment. And whether for me, poems are like short films in some ways too. So Amélie and Michel Gondry's Blue Indigo.
And so now
It's me now. Okay. Well, I think that I have to. Both of these answers I'm going to give, I have to credit Dr. Sue Scheibler at Loyola Marymount University because they introduced me to both of these. The first I'll mention is Derek Jarman's Blue from 1993, if anyone's seen it. The entire film is a single image of a blue screen.
wow.
And it's about, the 90 minutes of sitting with this blue screen and this a variety of voiceovers, one of which includes Tilda Swinton acting out and voicing these different associative thoughts, like you were saying, Elena, that come to him during his final months alive as he's dying of complications due to HIV/AIDS. And I think it's so poetic to me because what do we do in poetry if not meditate on an image for the length of however long we're given that poem? And to meditate on blue, which for him at the time, he was losing his eyesight due to these health complications, and the only things that he could see were in shades of blue. And so you enter this pure state of empathy. It's poetry at its finest because it is only this one image of which we are able to see through this speaker's eyes. And it breaks my heart every time I sit, if I can manage to sit through it. It's a really unruly film. I mean, it's the sound design is incredible because for the entire time you're challenged to sit with this grief that is going on, and he names so many. One of the parts of the movie that happens in the beginning and in the end of the film are these. He lists the names of people, lovers, friends that have died also of this, and then a second later he's associating into a totally different frame of mind. But because we know where this is coming from, and because we're only sitting with the one image, we are really there with him in this state of mind. And on the way over here, I had jotted down one of the quotes from it. There's one of the thing. There's a lot of different storytelling going on, narration of different parts of his actual life, of things that he was experiencing, and then there's some more poetic kind of waxing into it. And the color blue takes on a character of itself. And he says, well, not him exactly, but the speaker over the image says, "In the pandemonium of image, I present with you the universal blue, blue, an open door to the soul, an infinite possibility becoming tangible." Oof, you know, when I think of like what is poetic, and I think about, you know, there's that great Emily Dickinson quote of, "I know it's poetry when it's
Takes my head off.
when it takes my head off, when I am so cold no fire could warm me." That movie makes me cold. Another one I'd mention is Wings of Desire. Yeah. Oh, is this yours also?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, Wim Wenders, my God, I was rewatching it. And for those of you who don't know, it's in 1980s Berlin. Yes.
81, I think.
Yeah. I think 87.
87. Oh,
Well, that's when it came
right.
out, but I don't know when it's
It's all
set
written
technically.
down on a Taco Bell receipt.
We'll find the Taco Bell card. We'll all go to Taco Bell with Suzanne after. But yeah, so that movie, I mean, it's just in it. This angel is able to hear the thoughts of all the humans that he comes across during this particular time of being in Berlin. And without the characters moving their mouths or anything, just as he moves through, he again, that associative poetic quality just kind of enters these different mental registers and hears the thoughts of their quotidian lives. And I mean, every line of the dialogue in that movie is pure poetry. And there's also just the visuals of it are so breathtaking, from the way that those wings translucent go in and out, the way that the black and white is used to show the point of view of the angels, but then the color is what it's like to be human from the human's point of view. And he falls in love with a lonely trapeze artist who he meets when she is flying and doing trapeze, and playing an angel with wings as well. And it's this beautiful moment of like uncanny recognition that I also think that is what poetry is. And another moment of it, and then I'll save it for the rest of for yours, is when there's this man on the train, or I think it's a train, and he's contemplating giving up on life, and the angel just puts his arm around him, and suddenly the thoughts that we hear this man have of, "Oh, my kids have left me, I have no point in life," he suddenly thinks, "Oh, well, maybe I can. Maybe I can stay a little longer. Maybe it's worth it." And I also think that's what poetry is.
All right, well, then it's me then, and I've got a little bit of a cheat sheet. Oh, here, I've got to put this on too. You know, I wanted to say that for me, the Venn diagram of poetry and films is that there's a quality of attention that it asks of you, both the filmmaker and the audience, both the poem maker and the reader. There's a way in which they're trying to though that art, those arts are trying to make you see differently. See something that maybe you've seen a lot, over time, and you, oh, I know what that looks like. Kind of what you just described, Harrison, the color blue, and how if you look at it long enough, it becomes something else, or something fresh, something fresh. So the movie that I chose, and I know we had the option because there was a lot of movies in competition, but the movie I chose to watch again last night is Barry Jenkins' Moonlight, which is an amazing achievement. It is it in a brutal world. He manages to find, one poetic moment after another, and a lot of it has to do with, he's obviously been influenced by Tarkovsky, by Terrence Malick. There's a kind of slow cinema that is operating in that movie where and I also think of that scene in Easy Rider. Remember when they get to the commune and it goes around and every single face in the circle is shot? There is a thing about being an actor. I was going to talk about what it's like to have a close-up shot when you've got the camera in your face and essentially you are in someone else's dream. Because beyond the camera, there's a very big deal on all sets about who's in your eye line, but beyond the camera are 100 people, grips, gaffers, DPs, all those people are there, and essentially you're describing something that's not there. You're talking about something that's inner, and there's a way in which the camera can see your thoughts. In fact, an awful lot of the work of films is done without language, but with image. And that's something about Moonlight that just slayed me. There are so many moments, so many great moments, and so many that I had to write some of them down so I wouldn't say them wrong.
That's what they said at Antioch University as well. It was the first thing they said, that both film and poetry are visual mediums.
Yeah. Well, what I saw, and I really just watched that last night, and I had the most amazing dream. It had nothing to do with the film, but there was a kind of aperture that had opened in me from having watched that. And I think that's the other great thing about art. All art is it can open an aperture in you so that you suddenly feel differently. It's in these times especially, it's a kind of art is a resistance just of its own without even being political, because it can be dangerous. Yeah, it can be dangerous to open an aperture in yourself and to actually see things differently. So what I said about Moonlight is that it rewards secrets. The way he shoots it, there are so many shots that linger on Chiron and the beautiful Mahershala Ali, where, he's a drug dealer, and yet there's this whole other thing going on with him. And you know that because the camera stays on him. Just absolutely, also all the posters have basically it's the first kid, and he's in blue tinge. And that actually comes from a line in the movie where they talk about in the moonlight by the sand, shot in Florida. In the moonlight by the sand, black boys look blue.
Yeah, the screenplay is really beautiful.
Yeah. It's very spare too. There's there's a moment when Chiron is talking about, I hate my mother, and Mahershala says, yeah, I do too, and I miss her a lot, and that's all I'm going to say about that. It's like 3 little lines, a whole life. So yes, there's a way in a very original way. He's treating the brutality, which is constant, and not like a violence porn, like you might see in another treatment. He's seeking out the tenderness. He's like a heat-seeking missile for the tenderness. It's so rewarding to watch it again. I mean, I hadn't really seen it since it first came out almost 10 years ago. It's just a beautiful movie to watch right now. And that's my vote.
That moment of them in the water too.
Oh my
These are
God.
some good ones.
It's so
These are
good.
some good ones. Also, that movie does something that poetry does. It honors the dignity and the lives of people who are bound to be utterly forgotten by history. They're nobody significant, nobody important. They're not famous. They don't do something astonishing. They don't make the news. They're just the people we don't even see really when we pass them. And this is so much what poetry does, is to see, acknowledge, and find the distinctiveness or the beauty in the ordinary. In other words, what we look past, what we don't really see. Right over there's a bottle. Was that a beer bottle? I don't know. It's under the seat. You started to look at that and think about how the glass was made and the workers who handled it on the production line and so on. And how is glass made? It starts out as sand. It becomes more and more interesting.
But those ordinary objects are always what lead us to the extraordinary.
Yeah.
And they in film they call it motifs, and we can call it metaphors or similes. But that if a filmmaker or a poet has chosen an object, there's a really important reason for that. And actually, the more ordinary the object, sometimes the more profound.
Like Neruda's.
Right. Okay. With Neruda's. I was just gonna say, like, if someone dies and you like, when my mother died, I saw a hairpin on the top of her dresser. Who would write about a hairpin? But those are the kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it's that element of engagement, which is the active attention that you're talking about too.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of calls to you to be present. There's so much distraction right now in the world. So, our screens and, I mean, I still am very in love with getting in the deep end with people on a conversational level, which means that I'm not so comfortable with like, oh yeah, it's all great. It's all, it's sort of like, those conversations. But I wanted to just read this because it totally touches on what you just talked about, Suzanne. It's another film that was in contention. It's called A Hidden Life. And the title is taken from this, The Hidden Life, Terrence Malick's last film. And this is the quote that opens the film. It's from Middlemarch, George Eliot. For the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. And that movie, A Hidden Life, kind of not seen, very much worth watching. It's a beautiful film. Terrence Malick's way with camera and the way in which he makes you understand what is being lost. It's all about living rurally and on the land. And he sort of makes you feel like you're inside the bodies of the people that are threshing the fields. And, the guy comes to a horrible end at the end, but that is the achievement of that film.
But you're not talking about Days of Heaven, are you? Or
Well,
because it's similar. I mean,
absolutely. And actually, I mean, I think he has the distance between those two films is 40 years. And in those 40 years, he's kind of, because there's a way in which the setting, you're right, Days of Heaven, which is
the most haunting
painting.
movie, such a haunting
painting.
movie.
But this film, A Hidden Life, takes place in the hills of Austria. They shot in the Dolomite Mountains, but it's like up in the hills where they're farming, which is hard to do. And he gets drafted, and he's a conscientious objector, and so he won't go. So he's, it's a true story. So he's, thrown in prison.
Everybody taking notes
the
on all the movies
story-
you're going to see now.
See what I want to just 2 seconds. What I want to say is the story is doubly told because it's told on more unconscious and subconscious level through the whole visual landscape, and then we're talking about the internal landscape, right? Too.
Yeah.
Same thing with poetry, right?
Exactly. Same thing with poetry.
Indeed. And you mentioned the word life came out of your mouth a couple times. That gives me an into, I'm going to mention, I'm going to be greedy and mention 2 poems that I feel work on the level of poetry, each one in an utterly different way. And interestingly, Harrison, back in the 90s, I did a loose, non-official national survey, all the poets I knew across the nation who I could reach. And that included some pretty good people. Robert Pinsky was in there, and maybe Lynn Emanuel, and locally Pete Fairchild, and all the noted poets that were around at this time in the 90s, and Charles Webb and Ron Kirchie were in there. And I said, give me your 10 favorite movies. I still have that list. Really great poets from everywhere. And guess what was at the 2 poems tied for 2 movies tied for the movies most often mentioned by poets? And one was Children of Paradise. Yeah, you figured. And the other was Wings of Desire. Came up the most number of times. A couple others that came up a lot were Chinatown and On the Waterfront. But I am going to pick as one of my 2 poems that I feel work in the way that poetry works. Wings of Desire, which, as Harrison described, I think he didn't mention, it's in black and white, grainy, kind of grainy. I mean, not real high contrast, kind of real arty black and white with deep, deep black shadows, and then the high contrast light that you see in film noir. But a little bit kind of smudged black and white, at least smudged according to my point of reference, up until a certain moment. And there are these 2 angels, and one of them played by Bruno Ganz, and the other by another German actor who's written down on my Taco Bell receipt in my car. Not as well known as Bruno Ganz. And then there is another figure who is played by Peter Falk, who had been an angel and chose life. Now, one of the angels, played by Bruno Ganz, and this is where I realized, thinking about this movie, many poets named it as their favorite poetic movie, but very few of them said why. What is it about the movie that is poetic to you? What do you mean by poetic? I was thinking about the movie, and there's one angel who starts to feel himself drawn to want to choose life. And the angels have the option of choosing life. But when they do, they give up their immortality, meaning they're going to die. Not die and then become an angel again. No. You don't get to do that. You don't get to be an angel again. You die and you're dead. So when you choose life, at the same moment you choose death. That's the bargain. That in itself is a kind of electrifying poetic idea, an idea that poets could understand. And this is what happens in the movie, and this is what made me think, that's the way poetry works. The audience, because it's a European movie, this would never be allowed, especially in that year, in 1987. would never be allowed in out of a Hollywood studio. The audience is going to have to sit there and watch a black and white movie for about 4/5 or at least 3/4 of the whole movie. When he finally falls in love or begins to fall in love with the trapeze artist and he chooses life, at that moment, everything turns into color. The movie turns into color. He sees color. He sees the color of the graffiti on the fence around him, that before that was just black and white. And the first thing that happens is he hurts himself and he bleeds and he sees blood. And for the first time, he feels pain and he sees the color of blood, that rich, deep, strange color. And it's wondrous to him. But at the same time reminds him, now this is what you bought into. You bought into pain. And I thought, oh, that's beautiful. Because that's what life is. You can hide from life and hide from pain and try to prolong your living as long as you can without feeling much. But when you choose life, vividness, you choose color, you also choose pain. And the other thing that I was paying attention to is the reasons that he gives to his fellow angel of why he chose life and death at the same time, and the pain of death and the pain of life. He says, look, this is some great dialogue too. And it's so much, it is so at the heart of what poetry is and what poetry does. He says, look, I don't necessarily want to make a child or plant a tree. I just want to be able to come home after a day's work, make myself a cup of coffee, open the newspaper and feel the ink of the newspaper on my fingers. And that gets back to what we were talking about, the ordinary, the things that we're contemptuous of because they don't seem important or glamorous or big. And yet when you think about them, it's all richness, it's all sensory, it's all feeling and part of being alive. So that is my number one vote. And I have another vote for a much more contemporary movie because I was thinking, okay, what recent movie have I seen that does what poetry does in its essence? And it's a movie that came out in, I believe, 2021, produced and written by Adam McKay, and it was called Don't Look Up.
I love that
Oh
movie.
my God. Well, I was fanatic about that movie, and anybody who did not love that movie could not be my friend
Agreed.
anymore, at least for a while. I was really, really annoyed with them because it's one of those things, it has, and the reason, I should jump right away to the reason I found it so poetic when I began to think about it this way, is that those of you who have seen it, and if you haven't, I think you might find it still relevant today, even 4 years later. I know, boy, is it ever. The whole movie is a metaphor. And of course, we know metaphor is the heart of, is the deepest tool that poetry has, or one of them, and the figurative language that poetry uses, which is to convey things to your intellectual understanding and your emotions and your unconscious and your subconscious in a way that is not literal. It doesn't just tell you this is what we want you to think, this is what we want you to believe. It transmits these messages to you through language, but in a level that goes beyond speech. so that you feel it. I don't really necessarily, since I'm not a religious person, I don't believe in the soul, but if there were a soul, it would convey it to you into your soul. And the metaphor, if any of you haven't seen this movie, and Adam McKay, who I think politically I might on certain levels disagree with, I found out because I read about him today. I felt, oh my God, we might have an argument, even though I love his movie, because he was a Bernie Sanders guy and I was absolutely a Hillary Clinton woman. And he was sort of a socialist, and I am apparently a radical centrist, I think, vehement centrist. Nobody dares argue with me about anything these days. So what happens is that the comet is about to strike Earth. All the indication and all the evidence and all the science shows it is definitely going to strike Earth. And when it does, that is the end of Earth. And the comet comes closer and closer. And people begin to try to warn the population, hey, this comet is going to strike Earth. It's going to be bad. We have to do something. It is very, very dangerous. And millions upon millions, tens of millions are going, I don't see anything. Nothing's wrong. I'm fine. My life is fine. What are you talking about? I don't care. What can we go to for lunch, and what can I eat next, and what's on sale, And what Adam McKay really meant the metaphor to be specifically, it still works. But it was, for him, it was climate change. Now, for me, seeing it in that year, and even more so now, in addition to climate change, I see other connections, oddly enough, between people going, what's wrong? Everything's fine. I'm cool. What can I buy? I don't know. And that is the way metaphors work and the way poetry works. For one, if the poem is really good, or if the movie, working as a metaphor, is really good, it never really goes out of style. Right? Every generation, it can be connected to a new situation unfolding in the world now. Human dilemmas, human folly. So, those are my two votes. Now, it's our time. We're out of time? Okay. Do they not have time to read their poem? Let's go to your poems. Everybody has been able to say some things about what you believe in. So how about everybody close with their poem from the anthology?
So I want to give a quick shout out to people like Brendan Constantine, Ava Jordan, Tommy Pico. And I even think of Carolyn Frichet's that poem called The Colonel, and Ocean Vuong's poem, Anaphora as a Coping Mechanism, just when we're thinking about how we tell a story and recreate. So this I saw in the 80s. It's based on a Peter Weir film called Gallipoli. The title is a line from the poet and also essayist John Wall Barger. The past comes to us out of the present like a thought we already had. It's director Peter Weir's World War I, 1915. It's 1981 when I'm trapped, stalled beneath a 14-foot screen inside a room made for weeping. For the game of God and the name of each gun in Gallipoli's heat, there they are, running. Which means I'm there too, 14 years old, already sprinting the length of hot white sand with a message for the other young men, the Aegean abayment behind. Help us, soon to be brotherless. The scene changes. Inside the sea's blue aqua cathedral eye, we swim naked in slow motion between the rise of exhaled bubbles and fall of black shrapnel as shore bombs hit and hit, muffled, foreboding is its own consequence. The minutes crushing up against our inner ear, dark, before the next wave's torn sleeves retrieve us up for air. I recognize this dead setup in the establishing film shot crossing my face. That's how I know they're doomed. Because I've been there before, seen the life I knew leave for good with the exposed cold, familiar as a child playing in the street, or boy cut into a man's uniform in what springs from the same scene where the watcher is being watched while music drifts into my window from a great distance, with the delayed instinct of the past. Wore in and wore out, thrown back into the kissed confession of it. Can you still see our bodies there? Dream adrift on an ice floe taken from light's red end of the spectrum before the berg allows only the color blue to pass through when death announces the longest day of the year is now. Thank you.
Can I borrow a book?
Oh, yeah.
The color blue is everywhere tonight.
I know, I was just going to say, what is the light from cheese?
While I'm pulling up, I think I know my page. While I'm pulling this up, I'll say that this poem I wrote after my grandfather passed away. And yes, I found it. I wrote this poem in a time after my grandfather passed away. It was only ever the probably fifth or fourth poem I wrote ever. And I grew up watching John Wayne movies with him, so this isn't about one particular John Wayne movie, but they all kind of blurred for me, and so too did the image of my grandfather start to blur with other things. So this is a poem called John Wayne Undressed. You're an actor, aren't you? Pretend this is dress rehearsal, and I'm untying the anger knotted down your back. Cast a lasso tight round your chest. Heartstrings choke into a shit guitar. I'll pluck it right. Leather with a side of whiskey, spilling indigo down your neck. Wash it off before I lap it up, cowboy. Thirst is watching you ride. I'm young, and you're on TV. Forget Mount Vernon, Hollywood, the Wild West. Give in with the tipped hat. Baby, that's the silver screen. Touch yourself, if it helps. Easy, steady, denim scratch of sandpaper skin. With every button, you strip America bare naked, so I beg you play a kinder man for the scene. Texas lingers with an open door. A question. Haven't you ever held a dog as it died young in your hands? Kiss me like that, cowboy. Taste of shame, grit in your teeth. Grab onto my throat, props for reins. Not the Rockies, just any fucking grocery store bathroom. Hang on tight. You know how I whimper. Shoot me down with those open casket eyes. Wonder where the horses go when they gallop past frame. You know, I never saw my grandfather cry, but I caught you tonight, John Wayne, undressed and weeping.
Okay. So I was shooting a movie about the fall of Saigon. It was April, and it was almost the exact anniversary of the fall of Saigon in April of 1975. It was 15 years later. This opens with an epigraph from Ocean Vuong. A helicopter lifting the living just out of reach. Dirty work. Night air whipped up by whirring blades cools us. The whole chute, an atmospheric swamp, invades this desert basin, thick, hot, sticky, like a dragon's exhale. At the location, an LA stand-in for the American Embassy, old French architecture, green around the faucets, black mold that won't scrub off. We trudge through the plot, grease painted, hair strategically oil slicked up, smoke Marlboros and feel the heat equalize in our lungs. Now, the middle of the last night, we bless this loud, doorless 1975 era chopper. We can't hear anything anymore. We're leaving. Scream your head off, Vietnam. Real Marines, cast as Marines, won't stop pumping their toy rifles, barking, evacuate, move it, unass this place, now. Takeoff feels like a giant standing up. The director says, you don't even have to act. Just let the gravity wash over you. Below us, the pitch blacks punctured with street lamps as we careen over the Hollywood freeway, oncoming headlights, rows of white and pre-dawn tails streak red in their brightness, receding as after a long night of tripping, trails, high on altitude or nothing at all, or after days on end of shooting the fall of Saigon. Never been in a helicopter before. On this Dramamine-free ride, we're passing through the gates of nausea and pandemonium. We have to be leaving, but are soon tugged back by the unchecked cargo of wannabe refugees, their arms hooked onto the landing skids, causing a drag on the engine's motor, a baffled whirring, high-pitched and shrill, like the wailing cry of the useful birds of Vietnam, the cattle egrets and oxpeckers that hang out in the grassy verges of airports, who do dirty work, attending to the water buffalo, grooming them, pecking out ticks, grease, snot, mucus, earwax. It's how they're nourished, grazing on giants who tolerate them, violently shake them off, passively allow them back. Fugitives are shrugged off with a sharp bank, unlatching them, pitching them off to the long drop into the South China Sea, all of them flailing, then soaking wet, handed towels, then on the next take, dunked again, all of them extras, summarily wrapped off the set in bathrobes. On board, we feel the jolt of their departures like a convulsion, feel the chopper suddenly burst higher, severed from attachments, eclipsed by the score, Hendrix growling through, there must be some way out of here, as if he isn't already years and years in the ground. Every time you fly, look for useful birds. Landless, they delight the sky.
Last poem, and then we will watch some movies. We will watch movies that are about poetry. Right, and this is inspired by Alan Rudolph's Choose Me. Alan Rudolph, a protege of Robert Altman. A movie came out in 1981. Keith Carradine, Leslie Ann Warren, Genevieve Bujold. If I'd seen a movie named Choose Me more than twice, conditional tense poem. I could have been the woman mixing tequila and orange juice, a dash of grenadine on the sober side of the bar, the men thinking I'm made for this red dress, but they're wrong. I'm made for something better. A night with me makes those men want more, but makes me want to move on. Sometimes I hear music, soulful, a voice of molasses and honey. There is more than one movie in me. Or I could have been that soft, hesitant woman in need of a roommate. I arrived with a story, fragments. My name is not what I'll tell you. At the station, the sound man knows what I need, he says, but my fascinations are immaterial. I advise callers on love, but have never been fallen in. When I fall out of myself, I set a table for two and raise my glass to a man who's not there. You could have been the man who arrives on foot by street east downtown LA. And of course, it's the 80s and night and neon colors the dark air. Your suitcase holds evidence proving your lies are truth. Suspect description, lanky with a steady gaze. You fight well when cornered in bed with a gangster's wife. Your kiss makes a woman roll over, then become someone else, something different, more herself. I could have been the woman who'd say, I am those women. The one who falls for a guy who sleeps in a bus depot, shows up at her door, or the one on a rooftop, woman with a gun and in love, acting out, impressing the moon and 4 stars, the billboard pitching the world's most wanted dark and glittering drink, the man rushing to stop her. I could, but I won't say. I'd be saying into air, to a space at the opposite end of the table where a wine glass standing alone would be wondering, what am I doing here? If a wine glass could wonder. Thank you for coming to this part of the evening. The evening is not over. We have cool things coming up. Cool things are. Thank you again, Quentin. Sorry, I went too long. It was all my fault. It started to become my dinner with Andre.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. And do we have a little break now, Quentin, or do we go right into the movies?
What do books feel like? We just spent about 15 minutes for the films, a little teaser for tomorrow.
Only
One of
15 minutes?
Yeah, one of the films is actually based on a poem of Elena's, so we wanted to show that.
Well, we want to see that.
The co-written poem with Lois P. Jones. Wonderful English filmmaker, Janet Lee.
It's brief, so we'll just dive right into it. But the books are for sale at the bookstore as well, so please get those.